Hey, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ian. This is Opinion, and at long last, I finally get to add my Dark Crystal Age of Resistance review to the slew of reviews that have already taken place. I know I'm coming in close to last on this game, but I've had a lot of life going on. I've had a lot of processing time, which means I got to watch the entire series twice, and I would love to share with you all of my views and thoughts and all that good stuff because I was so excited about this series, and as usual, I have a lot to say. I saw The Dark Crystal in theaters at age 9. I remember it being very different, very strange, and really dark and pretty wonderful. I was a Henson kid. I grew up with Muppets. I grew up with Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, which is one of my favorite things on the entire planet, and it's sitting right here right now because the holidays are coming up. My father took me to see The Dark Crystal in theaters, and I was like, how'd you like it, Dad? I sounded like Mickey Mouse apparently as a kid when I was little. And I remember very distinctly that he kind of looked off into the distance and he said, "That was weird." The other thing I want to tell you is that back in my day, we got nothing after the film. We got maybe some trading cards, a lunchbox, and a Fizzgig puppet that didn't really look like Fizzgig. But that's all we had. So that's what we had to live on for years. We didn't get action figures. We didn't get toys. We didn't get comic book adaptations. We didn't get any more story. The Dark Crystal was it, man. We had kind of that tease in the around 2012, 2014, where they were going to make a sequel to the Dark Crystal movie called The Power of the Dark Crystal with King Jen and Queen Kira. But alas, that got canceled, and we were once again back to nothing. Here we are, and Dark Crystal fans all over the world can rejoice because we not only got 10 episodes in this season, we got 10 hour-long episodes of puppetry. It's a win-win. I'm just gonna ride on the fact that most of you already know all the details, all the deets. See what I did there? That you know everything. So I want to just tell you my thoughts and observations. Some of my first impressions of the series overall is, if you've seen the film, one of the biggest parts of the plot is that all the Gelfling were wiped out. So it's a little bit depressing to go into this series and meet all these Gelflings and get invested in them, which I did because I think the character development is pretty good. We're going to get to that. But you know what the end game is. You know that at some point we're going to love these characters and then we're going to lose these characters. And that sucks, but I've never entered a series with that knowledge going in. And it's a totally different dynamic, and it really made me look at it in a different way as a spectator. I did notice right away that the tone of it is kind of the way that it's set up is very Lord of the Rings, very Game of Thrones. We've got the clans, we've got the rulers of each clans, we've got the clans within the same species that kind of don't get along, and it reminded me of things like the elves and the dwarves in Lord of the Rings having kind of a rivalry, the different houses in Game of Thrones having different rivalries and fighting for power. I thought that was very interesting and very apropos to the fantasy world that we live in now. And another big thing that I really didn't expect was that the Gelfling and Skeksis get along in this series. In fact, the Gelfling are in service of the Skeksis, and they kind of hold them on this pedestal as the leaders of their world, the trusted leaders of their world. Very interesting to me. And I do remember thinking when I heard about the series, oh man, they're gonna CGI the hell out of this and it's gonna lose that magic. Nope. They really reeled it in with the CGI, and they used it sparingly, and they used it to great effect. They did it for sweeping landscapes. They did it for some of the effects that would have been either really difficult or nearly impossible to pull off with puppetry and practical effects and props. I give them huge kudos for that, because you know that we're saturated with CGI right now, and it is so refreshing to see the return of puppetry in this form. It is top notch. They went full force in recreating Thra. It was so complete. It was so detailed with everything. I mean, they had the small creatures, they had some of the small animals and beings that populated the world in the original film. And that was one of the things that made it so intriguing. It is absolutely visually engrossing. As a rule, I will not rewatch any of these episodes on my phone, because that's not right. Hallelujah that it is back on television in this way, in such a mainstream way. I think this helped puppetry cross a major threshold, and we can't go back now, and that's a really good thing. I will admit that I thought the first few episodes were kind of choppy and fractured, but when I thought about it in hindsight, it's a lot of story to tell. We had to meet all these Gelfling, we had to get them together, and they had to start all working together towards the main arc of the story. So that's a lot of chess pieces to put in place. I was cheering for Audra. I was like, come on, Audra. Come on, Audra. We're 3 episodes in. You got to do something. But I understand more about Audra now, because I did not know that she came from Thra and was part of Thra. And so I noticed that she takes a much more neutral stance in things, because whether good or bad, depending on the character, she respects all life. So there's only so much that she can do, and there's only so much involvement that she could have. At least that's how it comes off to me. I really like that we get such a variety of Gelfling in this one. If you base it on the original film, I thought they were all going to look exactly like Jen and Kira, and we were going to just kind of have one aesthetic. But no, we don't. We have the ocean Gelfling, the mountain Gelfling, the woods Gelfling, the cave Gelfling, and they all each have their own unique culture. And they really flushed that out. I thought that was very nicely done. And it's also nice to see that even a peaceful race like the Gelfling had rivalries and divisions which within their own race, within their own world. I like that the Gelfling are flawed in that way. It makes them much more interesting and much more relatable. Some of the highlights for me that I really, really enjoyed, and in no particular order. For example, the puppet show within a puppet show. I thought that brilliance and gorgeous to watch. And it wasn't just puppetry, it was stick puppetry, it was hand puppetry. Even within a puppet show within a puppet show, they had different kinds of puppetry. And I LOL'd when they said, we're going to do a puppet show, and the Gelfling went, oh God, no. I love that. I thought that was fantastic, and I thought that was the spirit of Henson. That's really what Henson's legacy is about, if you ask me. You want to know one of the other highlights of this series? I'm going to tell you. It's Hup. It's Hup. What a fantastic character. And what an opportunity for us to learn way more about one of the other races in this world, the Podlings. We see them all throughout this series, and we get a much bigger deep dive into what they're about, the dynamics of their tribes, what they're like individually. Little potatoes running around. They seem a lot more mischievous in this. They're running around with their butts hanging out. They don't bathe. They eat mud balls, I think. They throw things at each other. I mean, who doesn't want more Podlings? Yeah, it's like tater tots. Like, yes, we keep them coming. Another thing that really caught my eye in this was the Skeksis castle. We got to go so many more places in it. I mean, balconies and other rooms that we hadn't seen before, and rooms that we had seen before. And it to me, it exemplified the reach of the Skeksis' power in this, and it made me there aren't that many Skeksis, but there's thousands of Gelfling and Podlings and everything in this world, and you start to think, how could they wipe everybody out? Now, I know we would get to that in season 2 because of the invention of the Gartham and the Gartham Wars coming up. But I thought that this did a great job at really showing the might of the Skeksis and the volume of their influence and power. And honestly, when I went back and watched the Dark Crystal movie, it made the solitude and the devastation of that world twice as much. And I thought that really hit home for me. Another highlight for me was the Arachne. I think I'm getting that right. There's a lot of words. There's a lot of names and titles and species to remember in this. So I'm not doing too shabby. You got to give me this one. But the spider things that used to live in the Groton caves, and they all got thrown out, and then they were kind of homeless. I think that's very interesting. I love that we got a little nod to the helping hands from Labyrinth. We're helping hands when they come together to collectively speak to the Gelfling or to the Skeksis or whoever. Those creepy little orchid babies that come off of them and attach themselves, as you go, I am part of the collective or whatever that is. I'm going to subscribe. I want to talk about the characters a little bit before I get into the acting and the talent involved in this. They were very clear that all of the main Gelfling in this, we have Rhian, Deet, and Brea. I would say those are the main 3. They each have their problems. They've each got their demons to wrestle with, and I really like that. Deet is more innocent and goes out to represent her people, and she's trying to find her way in a very unfamiliar world. She literally has been hidden away underground, and I thought that was a great metaphor. Rhian is trying to live up to the expectations of his father. Brea is grappling with her family life. Brea is grappling with the mom who's in charge, and 2 very different sisters, and being kind of in the mix of that. And the family story in that is very strong, and I think the right way to go with that. The Skeksis, the Skeksis are the Skeksis. What you see is what you get. They're arrogant, they're narcissistic, they are self-involved, they are greedy, selfish, conniving, and delicious. They're wonderful. They're wonderful to watch, and it's nice to see them again. In addition to some new Skeksis that we hadn't seen before, because they're in this. They're not in it later. We obviously know which ones are going to disappear, but they're in this. Before I get into the acting and the specific voice talent involved and all of that, I'm not going to say that this series was without its flaws. There were definitely some things that stuck out to me, especially upon second viewing. One of those things, probably at the top of my list, is as visually stunning as this series is, the cinematography. Now, Louis Leterrier is obviously a very talented director, a very competent director, and I'm glad that this series was in his hands. However, there's only so many sweeping vistas that you can do in a fantastical world. The cinematography, some of the shot choices came across as very tepid to me. It seemed as though the director did not trust the puppetry and the artistry to do the work. We would go from one sweeping vista to another sweeping vista to another, to a zoom in, to a zoom out, to, the camera just never stopped moving. And you have to have some stillness to give your eyes a rest so that you can kind of refocus and get ready for the next part of the story. The other thing that was happening was shaky cam. And personally, I don't think shaky cam has any place whatsoever in a world populated by puppets, because the puppets are responsible for the movement, and the puppets are responsible for conveying the emotion of the scene, the physicality of a scene. We don't need any extra help from cinematography. I did not think that was a good choice. They also did this weird thing sometimes where you were kind of watching a scene from afar, almost as if you were a third person in the scene. They did stuff like if we were running after one of the carriages and there was mud flinging up, that the mud would get on the camera, which makes you go, oh, this is being filmed. So I didn't quite understand what was behind those choices. It seemed to me like it was trying a little bit too hard to seem edgy and on par with all the other cinematography techniques of today's television, but I don't think you need to do that. I just don't. I think that the world is so fascinating, the visuals are already fascinating, and the puppets are the center of this. All the visuals orbit the puppets, so they don't need a lot of help. You've already got really talented people doing this and speaking the voices and all that. So I hope that they go forward, that they will maybe trust that a little more. I don't know. One of the character arc problems that I had with this series was that of Brea's sister, Celadon. I had a really tough time with her turn kind of to the dark side, where she kind of turns into a Skeksis queen that looks like Tori Amos. And how cold and unempathetic she was at the death of her mother. Not only was I not completely on board with how quickly that turn was and how willing she was to stay with the Skeksis, but I also was not on board for how quickly she turned back, because she had people telling her, they're bad, they're screwing us over, they're killing Gelfling. No, they're not, la 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 la. Well, then she had to practically be in that same position by the Skeksis, and I could see where they were doing that story-wise, but then she suddenly turned back. She's really the one that you want to get kind of the screw. But we lose Tavra instead, and I wanted Tavra to stick around. If the series continues, which I believe it will, they do have some explaining to do. There's a lot of practices and details in this that obviously did not carry over into the Dark Crystal movie. So there's got to be some continuity with that. So I hope that they'll get that going. For example, what are those giant claws that carry the crystal up and down, and the magic chain that wraps around it? And why in the new Dark Crystal, well, the old Dark Crystal, why does it just hover? They just access it there. Why? And then they just have a little beam catcher instead. So something's going to have to happen where they explain that, because that doesn't make sense. The other big thing is it's very vague exactly how Gelfling and Podlings are connected to the machine in the film. Like we just see a tube and we know there's something going through it, and that's supposed to be coming from a living being. But in this one, man, they give you the old shoulder blade needles, and God, that must not be fun. But I like that they added that detail in this, because it was very unclear in the film. I hope they figure that out too. Why are all the Fizzgigs in this called Fizzgigs? Is that their species? I thought Fizzgig from the movie was that was his name. I never knew his species, but now they're all Fizzgigs, and one of them wears an eye patch. Was that? I feel like that was a nod to the Last Unicorn.
Oh, purr, do that. Yes, that be nice.
It's probably me, but I am admittedly not clear on the darkening. I believe the darkening is almost like this computer virus that's inside Thraw, that's kind of screwing everything up, and it's seeping into living beings. It's like pollution. The darkening is basically pollution, and I believe it comes from the corruption of the crystal and the abuse of the crystal. So it's like the crystal is toxic dumping out into the world all of its garbage, and that garbage is going in all of the animals and stuff, and then they're going cuckoo crazy and attacking people and having purple eyes. I think it's time to talk about the voice acting, because that's one of the things that stuck out to me, obviously, and for the most part I thought they assembled a really, really great cast for this. It's nice to see. One of the best things about this cast is that some of the puppeteers are also the voices for the characters. And that's a great way to go, because not only does it get people that would normally be behind, well, under the scenes, into the mix, but we need new faces. We need new talent. Every sci-fi, fantasy, everything these days just gets half their cast from Game of Thrones. And while I understand that because the show gave them a lot of exposure and they're working actors, so they should be getting work, I think we need some new people in addition to that. Give some new people some chances. As the three main Gelfling characters, we've got Taron Egerton as Rhian, Natalie Emmanuel from Game of Thrones as Deet, Anya Taylor-Joy as Brea. I think these three actors are really terrific. They have expressive voices. I gotta tell you, and I'm sure a lot of you agree with me, Deet is just, she's such a charming, wonderful, lovable character. Her innocence, her tenacious happiness. She just won't stop being curious and happy about everything. And that's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. Rhian, you know, Taron Egerton has a vulnerability, but also a toughness. I always like that he's always willing to go to bat for his friends. He stands for the truth. Anya Taylor-Joy as Brea brings a vivaciousness and a mischievousness, and her character is hungry for knowledge and wants to get to the bottom of the things. She loves her family. These are three very, very detailed, vibrant characters, and I think that's obviously the artistry of the puppetry, and it's also these actors that brought their chops. I think they carry the series very nicely, and it is really nice to see three established young actors put everything they've got into a beloved franchise like this, because you know damn well they've got to know what the Dark Crystal means to people, the legacy of it, what it means to fans of Jim Henson, what it means to fans of fantasy. So I say, good job. You probably already knew that I was going here, but if I'm gonna gush over any character in particular, it's Hup. It's Hup. Victor Yared, who's one of the people on this cast who does the puppetry and the voice as well, just brings it all the way home for me. Hup is such a lovable character. He's strong, he's honest, he's a fighter, he's funny, he's irreverent, he's just delightful, and I didn't expect to fall in love with a Podling. I'm in love with a Podling. Fight me. And one of the reasons I think that he's such a rich character is just that, because you've got the puppeteer himself doing the voice of the character. He knows that character in and out. The Brits know how to do this, you guys. The Brits have been acting for a long time. So whenever they go through and they get a little basket full of Brits, I got my basket of Brits, and I'm gonna get all these British actors. They just know what they're doing. We've got Helena Bonham-Carter. We've got Jason Isaacs as the Emperor. And as little as we saw Helena Bonham-Carter, I bought it. I thought she was a great Audra. Jason Isaacs is a sophisticated, complicated Emperor. And one of the big challenges that they had with this series, as you know, is reestablishing characters that were voiced by completely different people in 1982. And for the most part, I think that is successful. I'm not quite on the same voiceover wagon that a lot of people seem to be on. And my examples of that, my examples of that would be Mark Hamill as the scientist. I know y'all love some Marky Mark. I love him as Luke Skywalker. But I just feel like his Skeksis character is just a different dressing of his Joker character. I find his voice usage a little over the top, a little too much, and to me it really does not sound like the scientist from the film. Someone else in the cast I know that people are going bonkers over would be Simon Pegg as Chamberlain, and he doesn't completely cut it for me either. It just kind of sounds like an imitation of an imitation in some ways. I think that he mostly sounds like Chamberlain, but it's not quite up to par. So don't throw things at me, okay? He's obviously a talented actor. I've seen him in many things. I have enjoyed many of his projects. I think he does pretty good. I just don't think he's knocks it out of the park. With some of these parts that are being recreated after 30 plus years, if I had to pick a role in this series that I thought was just a hole-in-one, for me that would be Donna Kimball as Audra. This is another character, another talent that has been a puppeteer with Henson for many years and sounds to me exactly like Audra. She has the inflections. She has all the little vocal colorings and the little quirks that Audra originally had. And to me, it is seamless. I love her performance. I love the Earth Mother grittiness that she gives to Audra. And I think she should get a huge pat on the back, because honestly, I feel like so many of the established celebrities are getting so many accolades for this that we've got to spread that out and make sure that the puppeteers and the voice talent that are not celebrities per se get that as well. Bill Hader and Adam Sandberg as the Wanderer and the Heretic was an interesting choice. I had no idea that was them at first. I had to kind of look it up. Me personally, I thought that Bill Hader was a more believable character. I thought that Adam Sandberg was being a little too much Adam Sandberg, and to me, they're the Stadler and Waldorf of the Dark Crystal. They remind me of something between that and the guy in Labyrinth who wore the weird bird hat that would make fun of him and talk back to him.
I also had no idea that Harvey Fierstein was a Skeksis.
I love Harvey Fierstein. If you don't know much about him, go look at his Broadway credits. And he's perfect for the Gourmand. And am I getting this wrong, or did they have a scene where they allude that Skeksis have 3 peepees? It came out here, and then it came out here, and then it came out here. So do Skeksis have 3 little Skeksis? Not only was it my least liked character on the series, it was my most unfavorite voice acting in the series. Awkwafina as the Collector. So the character itself is disgusting because it's constantly covered in boogers. So we get to watch this thing drip and ooze all over the place. That was a lot of fun. Awkwafina, I don't know what she was doing with this characterization. She made the Collector sound like some grumpy woman at a bagel shop who didn't have enough cream cheese. Oh, there's not enough cream cheese on my bagel. Ugh. I thought it was just not the right choice for this at all. It seemed like she was in a completely different fantasy series. And I cheered when that character died. And it was so satisfying because the character's head exploded. Yes, that was perfect. That's how I would have wanted things. I could go on, but there's so many actors and characters in this show that would require an entire other video. And but hands down, they clearly got really good talent in this. Everyone's on board, for the most part. Everyone's dedicated. The people that I didn't like are gone, which is great. So we can just go forward now with the actors that I do like, which is just about everybody. The music score for the series by English composer Daniel Pemberton did leave me a little hollow. I didn't feel like there was enough music, and what music there was felt incidental and just kind of like musical commentary rather than a lush, wonderful score. We didn't get many of those giant music sweeping moments. There were a few, but in a 10-part series, it was not enough for me to really get involved with the music. It certainly didn't take away from the story, but in the end, for me, it really didn't add that much to it. In the end, the way that the series wrapped up felt right. We are about to go to war. We've got the invention of the Gartham. We've got the Gelfling tribes coming together like they never had before. We've got Deet, having the darkening passing to her. I mean, the most innocent character probably in this series, you know, gets the darkening, and she has to, you know, we get the flashbacks. I'm excited to see what happens with that. You know, the little flashback of the Gelfling running through the forest with the little baby. I think that's Kira. I want to know where Jen comes from. They wrapped it up very, very nicely, and that's not easy to do in this day and age. Overall, I think this series was a success. I think it was a big milestone for Henson. I think it was a big milestone for Netflix to take a chance on something like this. I was surprised. I was delighted in many, many times. And did I mention I love Hup? Whew! That was a lot. I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me in this review. I'm so glad I'm finally reviewing this. I hope and pray that we get a season 2. I think we're going to. And I would love to hear what you thought of the series down below. Be sure to leave a comment. As always, like and subscribe. I'm Ian, and that's my opinion. I don't have a wooden one.